You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Shandek. Featured columnist Jay Bilstein is with me. Today on CYInterview, we welcome former Las Vegas showgirl Scarlett Grable. In 2018, an article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal titled, "After Hip Surgery, Ex-Las Vegas Showgirl Embraces Second Act," was written about her. Today we welcome her to get an update on her life and focus on some of her career highlights to Las Vegas entertainer. Scarlett, thanks for joining us on CYInterview. How are you?
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege. Thanks.
Well, we really enjoy having you and look forward to hearing about your wealth of Las Vegas knowledge and your amazing career. So just to begin, let's just start with something very simple. When did you start dancing? What was your dance background before you ended up in a Las Vegas show?
My dance background started when I was about 5. My mother was a dancer. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and after she had my brother, I was about 4 and a half, 5, and my mom used to take me to the dance school with her, and they were doing the disco dancing, and they did ballet and tap, and one day my mom said, "Why don't we give Scarlett some lessons? She loves coming," and I started taking ballet with my first teacher. Her name was Virginia Paolo, and I did ballet with her up until I was a teenager when I went to the Los Angeles High School for the Performing Arts in 1985, and I was the first graduating class of this school in Los Angeles in 1987. Now it's like a big, big school in Los Angeles, but there was only like 50 of us that graduated, and I was in the dance department, and I graduated with honors in the dance department. I was the chairwoman of the dance department of my school, and then that was basically where I got my training, because the School of the Arts, they provided you with free training as long as you went to school during the morning, and then they would give you 3 hours after each session each day. So 5 days a week we'd have, it would either be ballet or jazz, and then it was like a music class that we'd learn all the notes on the piano. I mean, it was all live music. Nothing was recorded. We danced to drums sometimes, the modern dance, and we had a pianist with the ballet instructor. It was a beautiful time to be a dancer in Los Angeles. It was just, everybody was so like welcoming and happy, and and basically that's where I got my training from the age of 5 until I was 17, 18.
So focusing on Las Vegas, you were in a dozen of shows during your career here as a Las Vegas entertainer, but of course we focus on one of the historic shows that took place at the Tropicana Hotel and Casino,
Yes.
which was the Folies Bergère. Can you talk about how you broke into that? Was that your first show in Las Vegas, I believe, as well?
Yes, it's my first show in Las Vegas. But originally, in 1987, when I got to Vegas, I was at UNLV in the dance department. Long story short, I met some made men at the Tropicana one night when I was going to see the Folies Bergère with my girlfriend from college, and I became friends with them. They walked us into the showroom that night. They put us in a big booth. He became my mentor. He was twice my age, probably older than that. He is the one that introduced me to the producer of the Folies Bergère that year in 1987, Larry Lee. And he invited me to an audition that was already staged. The girls were already coming, and I was going to come in for my first audition. Well, after that audition, Mr. Lee called me from the stage and said, "Miss Scarlett Grable, can you come down to the theater?" So I go down there. He sits me in the booth with all the head honchos at the Tropicana. He goes, "Listen," he goes, "you're right out of high school. I want to hire you, but you have no experience." He goes, "What I want you to do," he goes, "is I want you to go get a 6-month job dancing in the show, and then call me, a couple months before the show's going to end, and then we'll get you back into the Tropicana and audition again." That's exactly what I did. I took a show in Lake Tahoe for 6 months at the High Sierra called Splash and Fantasy. March of 1988, I called Mr. Larry Lee, told him I was in the show, and he said, "I'll fly you down next weekend, your day off. You can audition by yourself in between shows." And so I did that, and the whole cast was there in between shows, and they watched me perform by myself. And I got the job. Mr. Lee said, "As soon as you finish your job in Lake Tahoe, call me and we'll have you come down to Vegas, and we'll give you your start date for rehearsals. And that's how I got in the show. It was just like that. It was perfect.
Just a quick note before I throw it to Jay. While you were there in that iconic show at the Tropicana Hotel and Casino, you ran into some of Las Vegas's, most well-known figures from the past, including Frank Rosenthal, for example. Tell me about that.
Well, basically, I didn't even know about that kind of stuff when I was there. He came to a few different places that I was with the men that I was hanging out with, and I was introduced to him. I doubt he would remember me. It was usually in, back of a fancy restaurant where all the Italian men would hang out. Of course, he's not Italian, but he was part of that gang. And it was just I didn't know who he was, but I remember him. I remember a lot of the people that I met during those times. I didn't congregate with, the showgirls and the show people at that time. I was on a different side of it. I liked that dark, kind of gritty, fancy side with all the wealthy people. That was kind of where I went. And everybody knew that about me, and so they just said, oh, that's the Scarlett. She's just doing that. But yeah, there was a lot of interesting people I met. I mean, do you know who Gianni Russo is?
I've heard the name, sure.
Well, yeah. Johnny Russo actually came out with a book. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, called Hollywood Godfather. Is that?
It's awesome. You have.
He owns State Street, correct?
Yes. I was there the night before the shooting. Are we? Yeah. I don't know if I should go into that. That's not my business. That was just I was there.
well, you certainly have had a very full Las Vegas life, shall we say. I want to take a turn back to you specifically because you are a bona fide showgirl. And there is a difference between somebody who dances and somebody who I would say is a classic Las Vegas showgirl. For people in New York City, and I don't know if this is the most accurate type of depiction, but it goes much more toward the type of things that the Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall might partake in, does it not? And I mean, the reason I say that is you talk about 170 kicks a night.
Yes.
That's, I mean, I think people who train to be professional kickboxers may not perform that many high kicks, but when we think in terms of athletics, and I always think of dancers as athletes, I think of them actually, Scarlett, as art-leets, because dance is a deft combination of art and athletics. If you can't be artful and graceful, you're not going to be a very good dancer, but you have to have every bit of the training, the skill, the endurance, and the strength that an athlete does. Do you feel with what you've gone through that perhaps the future of all these showgirls and people like the Rockettes in New York and people who dance for a living and dance hard, that as a society and in terms of the industry of entertainers, we don't think enough about the future of all these people who work so hard to entertain us and then, like yourself, end up with a need for hip replacement surgery, which dramatically changes their life? Am I overstating or am I accurate?
You're accurate. I believe if I took myself back to when I was 18, did I think that if someone told me, well, they did tell me when I was 25, if you don't stop now, you're going to have hip replacements in your 30s or 40s, and I didn't listen. So we need to listen to these doctors. I didn't have a backup plan. I never did. That wasn't my intention in my life. That my dream was just to be a professional showgirl in Las Vegas, and I manifested that dream. And if I had known maybe the nutrients I could have provided calcium to my body to keep my bones stronger, I didn't know about it. There was no education for that. I think now there's a lot of education for athletes and dancers and performers because you can juice for calcium, you can eat for calcium, you don't take the supplements out of the bottle because they don't work. And that's what we were told back then. Oh, just take a supplement. That stuff doesn't work. I think they're better knowledgeable now as far as, what they need to do. But you can never tell a dancer, you can't dance forever because they think that they will. Like I did. Of course I did. And when I was 33 and I had to exit the stage at Harrah's, my life was broken. My heart was broken for years. It just tore my soul apart. It still does. It makes me cry because I love it. Sorry.
Well, but it's if you do something long enough and you dedicate yourself to that thing, often I think it becomes difficult to kind of say, who am I and what is it that I do? You do something long enough, you put enough heart and soul into it like you do and did, and you become, right? It's like, who are you? I'm a dancer. Not what are you, who are you? I'm a dancer.
I am.
And I was fortunate. I grew up in New York City. That other little, you grew up in a big city on the West Coast. I grew up in that little town on the East Coast. And when I was in college, I was a competitive power lifter, among other things, and then I got a kind of typical job while I was still in college working as a trainer in a health club. And almost all the women who were trainers were Broadway dancers who didn't always have work on Broadway, so they needed some kind of gig to help them keep paying the rent, because most of them were chorus dancers. And this is going back to the 1980s. In the 1980s, I don't think chorus dancers were making a particularly large sum of money, and I don't think they had pension plans and all kinds of great medical benefits, and I don't think anybody was looking out for them between gigs, and so they had to find other things. And these were some of the hardest training people, not women, hardest training people, man or woman, that I've ever met in my life. And I learned so many fascinating things, whether they taught me about Alexander technique, whether they taught me about Rolfing and different kinds of massage they would go for to kind of help relieve the stress in their bodies and so forth. And it was really an eye-opener for me, who as an athlete had always kind of focused on strength and endurance, to really start focusing on a kind of different part of athleticism. You, at some point in time, had to stop dancing. That was around how old? You were 33?
33, yeah.
33 years old. And I suppose there was a certain period of time of psychological torment. When did you have your first hip surgery?
Well, I waited a long time. I have to be honest. I didn't have health insurance, and I wanted to touch on that just for a second. There was no health insurance available to any of us dancers, in any of the shows. One time I had it. I did have it at the Tropicana Hotel. It was Humana, but you only had it when you worked there, because that was a corporate company. All the other shows, there was no health insurance, there was no benefits, there was nothing. If you got hurt, you'd go on, SSI, and then they'd pay you, and then they'd fire you. Because that happened to me one time. You get off work for 2 weeks and you go on state, insurance, and they say, oh, well, you can't come back. That's what they would do. So in 2003, for a whole year, I just basically laid in bed. I didn't do anything. I was miserable. I had to wait. And this is true, and it states it in the article from the Review Journal. I had to wait until President Obama passed the Obamacare. I'm a single woman. I have no dependents. I made under a certain amount each year. I qualified for the Obamacare in 2014. Within 6 weeks of me receiving that letter from the state of Nevada with Governor Sandoval, I took that letter to my doctor at Desert Orthopedic, and they scheduled my first hip surgery for October 20th, 2014. It was that fast. It was like they knew I was waiting for that health insurance. It took a while to get. It took me almost 9 months to keep applying and applying with that Nevada Health Link thing. Finally, I got through and got approved. And they sent me, because of my tax return, they sent me to the state Medicaid board. So I didn't pay for anything. And I know everyone says it's the lower income. Yes, I was lower income in 2014. I admit it. And I needed someone to help me. I was by myself. And they did. The state helped me both times. The second surgery was March 2nd, 2015, 4 months apart. The reason why Dr. Kang did that was because I had no one living with me. He would have done them both at the same time, but it would have been too difficult for me without having someone to help or physical therapy. So I had to wait 4 months for the second one, and then that was the hardest time right after that.
In my case, I have more, as we discussed before we actually, started recording. I have people in my family who've had, more than one person who's had hip replacements, and after the hip replacement, you do need physical therapy. There are changes to your routine. I mean, certain basic things. I'm sure they told you, hey, you're not going to be able to go out there and run so far. How challenging has it been after the hip surgery and after the hip prosthetics?
Well, like I said before, my state Medicaid did not pay for a rehabilitation. Okay, they give you things in the hospital. I was there longer than most people. I was there for 3 to 4 days at a time before they released me both times. I think they did that. I think my doctor did that because he knew I wasn't going to get any physical therapy after that. I don't know how I did it. I just remember standing in my apartment after the second surgery, and my sister dropped me off. I'm standing there in my hallway at 9 o'clock at night with a walker, and I'm like, what the H just happened? Now I'm alone again. It was heartbreaking, and I started crying, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I remember what my doctor said. He said, Scarlett, you have this. You got this. You're a strong woman. You can make it happen. Your body will come right back. And he was right, sort of. I mean, it took me a while. It took me like a whole year to actually be able to go up and down the staircase, to walk long distance, to use a stationary bike. I was always good with upper body strength because even when I was not able to walk, I would always go to the gym and do upper body, because he told me, he goes, after your surgeries, you're going to need your upper body strength. So that was always key to me. Whether I was in like dire straits and pain, I still did that. And my legs were they were almost dead to me before the surgery, so I would drag my legs around with this walker. It was horrible. And, I was only 45 years old. It was like, but somehow, you guys, I did it. You wouldn't even know today. I mean, people in the gym wouldn't even have any idea that I had 2 hip replacements. The only way you would know is if you saw the scars on both my hips. And then people ask me, if I go to the pool, they'll say, well, what's that from? That's the only way people know. But I still have challenges. I drive a Corvette. Let me tell you, trying to get in that Corvette day in, day out is really still hard for me. But I can't afford to sell it right now, so I have to keep driving.
I hear you. And also beautiful vehicle.
Thank you.
You live the life of a Las Vegas showgirl. You didn't just work as a showgirl. You lived the life of a Las Vegas showgirl, which we'll get into the next time you're on, God willing.
Yeah.
You then paid the price for the cost to your body. The toll, just like any athlete. If somebody plays the line in professional football for 15 years, there's going to be an awful, awful toll on the body. You've paid. You've paid not just with your training and time. You've paid with your body. Now you've had the hip surgeries thanks to the Affordable Care Act, as you've said. What's next for you?
Well, I mentioned to Chris yesterday when I spoke to him, I just finished real estate school. I was a realtor from 2004 to 2008, so I didn't keep it up because, the financial collapse. So I couldn't afford to keep my real estate license. I let that go. So during the pandemic, I didn't know when the city was going to open. I thought, well, I need to do something. I need to secure my future. I don't have a pension. I don't have a 401k. I don't have a man helping me. I'm by myself. I got 4 cats. what do I need to do? So I said, you know what? I love real estate. I have a passion for that part of life. And so I took the online course, finished it, and now I'm studying this next week to take my test in July. So fingers crossed, I'll pass it the first time, not have to do it the second time.
Well, we certainly wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And we're out of time now, but I have to say that you certainly have tremendous charm and great verbal skills. So I certainly believe with your charm and your verbal abilities that you'll certainly have a resurgence in real estate. And when you're next back with us, I'd really like to hear some of those fascinating stories about, Las Vegas back in the day. And I think it'd be very, very interesting. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us, and we wish you a tremendous amount of good luck. And I just want to say this to people out there. The people who are entertaining us in Las Vegas work very, very hard. They train a long time, a lot of them. Like Scarlett, have been training since they were 5 years old. This is a passion. It's a way of life. And a lot of times they pay with their bodies. And I don't think the entertainers writ large, not just dancers, but everybody, I don't think they get enough credit, quite frankly. And we thank you for coming on, and we thank you for being part of what makes Las Vegas the entertainment capital of the world. Chris?
Thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So for Las Vegas showgirl and dancer Scarlett Grable, featured columnist Jay Bilstein, and CYInterview, I'm Christian.